not a good person. I really am not. Not a good person. Not a good father. Not a good teacher. Not a good partner. Not a good friend. Not a good colleague. I am not a good person. These might seem like harsh words, maybe jarring or overly self critical, um, but that's not what this is for me. It's part of a larger personal journey for me in trying to understand just what it means for me to be a quote unquote good person. Why it was so important for me to see myself as good and what kind of harm really that it did to me. The idea first entered my head when I was actually teaching at Villanova. So this is like well into my 30s. And at Villanova, I was having this very interesting experience um, there because I don't expect everyone, unless you've actually been to Villanova, to really understand the culture. But the culture there was just politeness. Like everybody was so damn polite, and I fucking hated it. Let me describe the culture. So, a vast majority of people carry themselves as like caring, polite, kind people. They'd smile and acknowledge you when they see you. Like they wouldn't try to like look the other way and pretend like they didn't see you. They'd actually acknowledge your existence. Um, they'd open doors for you and hold them for you, actually, regardless of how far away you were and how long it took for you to actually get there without a complaint or anything. They regularly compliment you and say thank you. Everyone was nice and polite, and that pissed me off. And it seems like a very odd, like something's wrong with me for not wanting people to be kind and polite. But I really was pissed off. I was really super annoyed by it, and it didn't actually take long for me to figure out why. Just because I thought initially, like, what the hell's wrong with me to like get so upset over this kind of stuff. But I was able to figure it out after having some conversations with people, like real quickly, that you know what it was. It was that it just all seemed so damn fake. It felt like some weird dystopian world where people stop being people, but instead more like robots that somehow learned how to behave in ways that was deemed by some algorithm to be pleasant or acceptable in a community, right? It was, for me, it was creepy as hell. And I didn't like it at all, not one bit. This isn't what I knew of people, at least from my experience. People are messy, they have all kinds of emotions. They are loving or kind, rude, angry, supportive, manipulative, empathetic, malicious, right? It's just all over the place. Like people aren't just one thing. There are a myriad of things, and they have a myriad of feelings, right? And they have a myriad of ways of viewing and engaging with the world. And people aren't what I was seeing from both the students and my colleagues at Villanova. Now, I want to be clear about something, right? This is not a knock on Villanova. This is not to say that there's something wrong with Villanova or that it was a bad thing. I'm just pointing out that I reacted in a very particular way, and I think what was revealing for me is that it revealed a lot about what mattered to me and what I would like the world to be, right? So I think for me, it was more like a way to gain insight on myself based off of my own reaction to a different environment. Okay. So then for me, in kind of asking this question and exploring this new world that I fell right into, right, was why are people like this here, right? What is this about? I thought maybe it was some sort of like self-reinforcing culture. You know how sometimes it happens where you walk into a culture and then you just kind of learn to adapt to that culture. You take on some of the elements of that culture. Have you ever traveled abroad for an extended period or lived in a different area? You kind of know what I'm talking about, right? Where, uh, you know, you're not even trying, but you kind of take on some of the elements of the community that you are living in. And as a result, you end up kind of reinforcing some of the kind of cultural norms in that area. Um, but then in teaching ethics, which was actually a required course at Villanova, which I very much appreciated, um, I started to see something in students that I really never asked about myself, right? Students wanted to see themselves as good people. Let me repeat, because I don't want people to misunderstand what I'm trying to say here. I did not say that the students wanted other people to see them as good people. No, no, no. This is not about how they're perceived by the outside world. They, by and large, wanted to see themselves as good people. It hurt them to think of themselves as not being good or clutching pearls here, right? My goodness, the thought of them being bad, right? It hurt them a lot, as in it was devastating. It was detrimental to their sense of self to think of themselves as anything other than good. It was jarring for them. I saw this specifically when I would teach Peter Singer's Solution to World Poverty, in which Singer discusses how we can save lives and reduce suffering from a lack of food, water, shelter, and medical care, all by simply using the money that we would use on unnecessary items like a new outfit or eating out at a fancy restaurant instead of just cooking at home. And instead, giving all that extra money, capital, to those who are suffering, right? I mean, a few dollars goes a long way in terms of providing vaccines and to prevent starvation. And a lot of countries, even in the United States, actually, right? The United States has a unfortunate reality that there's a lot of children like starving from lack of access to food, right? And nutrition. So Singer's argument is fairly simple, right? And it's actually that simplicity where that gives it its power, right? So regardless of the critiques of his arguments, and people have pointed out, different issues with his specific argument, he does do a good job of pointing out painting a picture in which your decision to treat yourself is kind of pitted against reducing the suffering of others, right? And you have to decide what you do with the knowledge that you actually can make a difference with the money that you have and the way that you allocate the resources that you have, right? And with each class and each new batch of students, I started caring less and less about Singer's argument and became more interested in the guilt that students experience, right? It's not that I didn't have students that felt guilty when I taught Singer elsewhere, right? Like I've taught, Singer, in other settings as well, right? Specifically like UC Santa Barbara, but also like had these discussions with students in like when I was teaching like private SAT classes, right? Uh, so I wasn't surprised that some students felt guilt. I was surprised by the overwhelming number of students that felt guilt, right? The guilt at Villanova for some reason was much more pronounced than in classes I've taught elsewhere. And I was curious why. Why did it eat at students to acknowledge that they think of themselves before others, right? Um, to acknowledge that sometimes maybe they are more self-interested or, dare I say it, even selfish sometimes. I had this, I, I had this exercise in which I'd ask students to just say the words, right? I am not a good person. Just say those words out loud, regardless of whether or not they believed it, right? So they didn't even have to believe it, right? I just wanted them just as like an exercise to try saying it out loud and then just kind of sit for a moment with how they're feeling, right? Just say the words. That's it. Some couldn't even do it, and those that did felt a kind of disgust come over them, right? As if they had just as if I had just dumped a bucket of like feces on them or something. Like they were physically, like physiologically, just disgusted with just saying these words, like having it come out of their mouths, right? That I am not a good person. Um, I'm not saying this to say something about these students or Villanova generally. I'm trying to tell you that though it seemed more easily identifiable with them, the truth is that I also had trouble acknowledging how much it mattered to me that I see myself as a good person, right? It's like one of those things where you often see some element of truth or recognize something in others before you see it in yourself, right? This is the kind of bias that I think all people kind of have, right? Which is this sort of self denial that is strong, and it was especially strong in me, um, because it's actually really hard to acknowledge truths about yourself. If it was easy, then I think the world would be a much better place. We would all be able to acknowledge our faults, our weaknesses, and just be able to, take responsibility for the places we fall short. But it's hard because we value ourselves. And more specifically, I think we all value having a certain image of ourselves. And for some, and I think in my case, what I saw in the students was what I had to start recognizing in myself, which was that I had a strong desire to see myself as a good person, right? Now, I don't think anybody's like this where they think they're perfect, right? Like I didn't think I was perfect, but if you were to put me up in some ranking system with the rest of the world on like, whether or not like on a goodness scale or something, right? Like if you just ranked me in the world, I would imagine I'd at least fall in the 50th percentile, like at least, like I'm not a bad person. I wouldn't be like a murderer or like a serial, rapist or something, right? That would just be awful. Like I am not one of those, right? So I would be by and large like neutral at worst, but I try to do some good stuff. I would probably lean towards good, wouldn't I? Right? Like that's kind of how I viewed myself. And it was really important that I viewed myself in this way. And especially that I was actually viewing myself as someone who constantly tried to be better, right? That I try to at least be a better version of myself today than I was yesterday, right? That I learned from my mistakes and I'd be a better person just in all kinds of settings, right? But the place I saw it more clearly, just how much it mattered to me to see myself as being good was in the context of my marriage. I needed to see myself as a good husband. And now that means a lot of different things for a lot of different people. But for me specifically, uh, this was, there's certain narratives that kind of went along with it. I told myself things like, I provide, I am more or less responsible. I don't forget birthdays or anniversaries. I do stuff around the house, right? I try to be as egalitarian and share responsibilities in the house. I like to cook and, do nice things for my partner. Um, then there was also my sense of purpose in life, right? So beyond marriage, I had this grander sense of purpose in life of wanting to serve others and make the world a better place. So I had these narratives that I'm a good citizen who tries to make the world around me better. I give to those in need, right? So all in all, like I'm a overall fairly good person. Whichever way you cut it at the core, I cared. I cared about being a good person. And because I cared so much about being a good person, when anything threatened that image I had of myself, I got defensive. I got really defensive, right? It was like when somebody would say or suggest something that might paint me as something other than a good person, other than a good husband, other than a good citizen, right? I would try to find a way to deflect or defend against, like make excuses for myself, a way to defend myself against those real or imagined accusations, right? Or insinuation, right? I had an excuse ready for everything I did to show that I actually wasn't a bad person, right? If I didn't do what I had promised, I dropped the ball because I was busy doing some other good thing, right? Like helping someone else, right? So it's not that bad that I broke my promise, right? If I snapped at someone, it was because I was stressed trying to do too much to give to others or be there for others or, you know, make a living so that I could support my family or things like that, right? I tried to find a way to make myself look better in all these situations. And what's crazy is it wasn't because I was concerned about my image if for the outside world, right? I wasn't really concerned with what others thought of me. It was because I couldn't acknowledge to myself that maybe I didn't care as much as I claimed I did, or that certain people matter to me as much as I wanted to believe they mattered to me, right? That I sometimes maybe was more concerned about myself, about my sense of pride, of my own sense of self worth, right? That those things mattered more to me than maybe actually the suffering or the needs of other people. And so the most hurtful thing someone could say to me was that I wasn't actually good and that I was lying to myself and thinking I was good, and that the evidence is in what I do. My partner especially was so insightful. I don't know how much of it was just spending all like a lot of days, a lot of time together, and seeing all the things that I actually do, or being a psychologist, just being much more. But I'm pretty sure she was insightful long before she went into that profession. But some combination of it maybe that she saw through my bullshit fairly quickly and did not have the patience to just let it slide. She would call me out on it, right? And goddamn, that was painful. And guess what I did in my defensiveness? Yeah, I told her it was her issue, that she failed to see the good in me, that she was, accusing me of things that were simply not true. That she did not know how to appreciate, she did not know how to acknowledge the good, she did not know how to be grateful. That was some gaslighting shit that I was doing. That's, I think, a textbook definition of gaslighting. Because the reality was, she was simply pointing to something that I behaviorally often just did and what kind of impact it had. It was like if you're giving a cause effect story of what I had done. Like, for instance, if I forgot to, take care of the bill, then there's a late penalty. And, if we share, since we're sharing finances, right? We collectively are paying for my, failing to do what I said I was going to do. Or that it makes it harder for her to trust that I'm going to do what I say that I do, right? Like, these are all reasonable things to point out, but because I was getting defensive, I wasn't accepting responsibility for what I had done, and instead found a way to make it about her instead of, taking responsibility for my own actions. So, but that's what happens when being good is so central to how you view yourself. When you don't acknowledge that you're holding on to this label, uh, over everything else, this need to be considerate, like to slap that label on yourself that you're good, you begin to act in ways to protect this view you have of yourself. And that's what I was going through, right? Even if it comes at a cost to others. And that's really who paid the cost. It was other people. That was what I was doing pretty much every day, to be honest, right? Because there's always something throughout the day where I drop a ball on something, right? Like, maybe one day I'll have a longer conversation about like working through finding out that I had like ADHD. But it was pretty common for me to drop the ball on something on a given day, right? So when my partner called me out on my lack of care or concern or a lack of holding myself responsible, I would blame her for my own callousness, right? When a colleague pointed out my inappropriate behavior, I blamed them for judging without understanding the full context. When a student complained about my teaching, I was dismissive of their feelings because what would a student know? I let my desire to be good, right, to get in the way of my actually listening to others' feelings, gaining some insight into them and myself, and really taking those concerns to heart and then making some real changes, which I imagine as a third person, if I'm looking from the outside, I would think like, yeah, that's what a good person would do, right? They would actually do the work to be better, right? Not perfect, but at least better, right? In an important way, and I think this is my kind of my point, is that my desire to see myself as good is what actually kept me from being good. Um, and once I saw, and it took a long time, right? It took like beating the drum over and over again. It took going to therapy and kind of working out a lot of this, like, why do I have the strong need to hold on to this notion of being good, right? But once I started to see little by little what it is that I was doing, I just saw it everywhere. I began to question everything that I was doing, right? And the motivation behind it, right? Like, where was my heart really? And I think the question that continued to press on me, and it still does even to this day, is like a helpful kind of guiding light is, who is this really for? Right? The things that I'm doing, who is it really for? Is it really for the person that I say it's for? Right? If it is, then what would that actually look like? Like, for example, if I'm helping a student with her, college application, and, you know, and I ask myself this question, like, am I really doing it for the student? Right? It's a helpful way for me to kind of keep myself in check and ask myself, like, look, is this to make myself feel good about myself, that I'm, worthy of praise, that I, have some value in the world? Or is it really for the student, for their benefit, right? Um, if it is for the student, then I would help them help them be the best version of themselves, pursuing the things that matter to them. I wouldn't impose my own beliefs on them. I wouldn't impose my own values, and I wouldn't direct them in the way that I believe that they should, be, in terms of like their life trajectory. And I would definitely not do it in the hopes of receiving some affirmation from them, to take credit for the accomplishments that they have. I wouldn't be looking for them to express like extreme gratitude, right? Like, that wouldn't be the reason why I do these things, right? Those would merely be like side effects, right? That would be like just some consequence of it. But that's not what I would be looking for, right? So, asking myself who it's really for was really kind of like, it started serving as a helpful guideline, just to check in with my heart, just to check in with my motives, just to check in with, what all this that I'm doing, what it was really about. And the thought I started having was, if it is what I say it is, then it would show in a certain way, in the way that I behaved specifically, right? There should be some tangible difference in the way that I carry myself and the things I say and the things that I do, right? And I'll be honest, the lines aren't always clear. A lot of times, there might be a mix of different motives here. But even in asking the question, it became clear to me that it did often matter to me that at least I saw myself as an agent of good. That if I didn't get affirmation from the student, that I got affirmation from myself, right? That I was able to pat myself on the back and say, hey, you did a good job. And therein lies the danger. When I get wrapped up in being a good person, I wasn't doing the things for the right reasons. I wasn't helping out of genuine care for them or for the greater good. I did it for me. I did it for my own ego. I did it because, I don't know, I needed to feel worthy. And though painful at first, and coming to terms with this reality, there was also something liberating about it for me. Like, I want to be clear about this. Like, the pain that I had to go through was excruciating. It was excruciating because it was deeply rooted in a long held need to see myself as somehow rising above the things that I was judgmental towards others about, their decision making, about their values, right? That I was above that, that I wasn't like them, that I was better, that I was somehow striving for something more, right? Like, so if that's something that has been part of my narrative or the way that I live my life for basically my almost my entire life, right? Like, to unpack that and to, just really smash it into pieces, like, I it just killed my sense of self. So when I say like the pain was real, it was deep, it cut to the core. Like, I mean, it actually cut to the core. Like, physically seeing myself in the mirror was hard on some days. But that's like one of those things where once you start seeing it, you just start seeing it everywhere. And I just couldn't hide from myself. And initially, as painful as it was, once I started to come to terms with this reality, what was liberating about it was that I didn't have to hide anymore. And it's like one of those things where if I were to use kind of like a metaphor or some image to represent what it felt like, right? It felt like I had been carrying a load, right? Like this heavy backpack for all my life. And, I just had gotten used to it because I've had it on for so long. And then I just didn't realize how light, how freeing, how liberating it felt to just let down that load, right? So this desire to preserve a self image just felt like work, whether I knew it or not, right? It was taking up work, mental space, emotional space. And once I was able to kind of acknowledge that, look, you know, I've been trying so hard to see myself as good, and that's been my guiding light, that I was actually very much falling short because I wasn't really facing the reality of all that made up who I was, all the feelings of, anger and frustration and impatience and jealousy, like those things that I didn't want to acknowledge about myself. It's there. It doesn't go away because you try to pretend like it's not there or you try to make excuses for it, right? It's still there. And I had to start acknowledging it. And in acknowledging it, I was able to start accepting responsibility and addressing the root of what I was doing. And oddly enough, as a result, I was able to kind of move forward. Right? Yeah, it's like, you've been if once when you've been pretending to be something you're not for so long, you feel trapped in what you're pretending to be. I don't know if anyone's ever had that sort of feeling before, right? But it's exhausting, and because you have to constantly lie, not to other people, but to yourself, right? It just feels like you're constantly in tension with yourself. You're constantly fighting yourself. And it's scary to take that mask off because you're having to see yourself for the first time. But once I did, I felt like I could breathe again. I didn't feel trapped by the facade that I'd created for myself. A, a facade that I was essentially imposing on myself, right? Because of that, I didn't have to be, I didn't have anything to protect. There was no threat to my identity as a good person because I wasn't holding on to that identity that's been keeping me in that cage for so long. Now, you're gonna have to give me a second. I'm gonna geek out for just 1 second here, okay? I swear it's all connected, okay? I had this crazy idea that, like this, I study moral development, moral psychology, and I had this crazy idea that, like when I was kind of thinking about this process of letting go of the image of being good, I don't know if somebody's already developed it in a more deeper way, but um, I have this idea that once you get to the final stages of moral development, like once you are no longer just kind of following rules for rules' sake or trying so hard to be good, but you're actually living out like what Aristotle might call a virtuous life, or Kohlberg deems like the highest moral stage of just stage of moral development, right? I had this idea that that person, like whoever that person is, they just stop thinking about what is or isn't good. Like the word good itself, right? The words good, bad, right, wrong, like these words just lose all meaning, right? The virtuous person that Aristotle describes is a person who doesn't view herself as good. The virtuous person doesn't even view themselves as a virtuous person, right? The word virtue doesn't hold any meaning for this person. This person just does what she does, lives as she does, thinks as she does, feels as she does, acts as she does, without any concern or trying to be good or right. They just do, right? And as I continue to shed myself of this need to be a good person, and trust me, it's still a work in progress, right? I'm more convinced that this is correct, right? Whether or not it's philosophically sound, or backed by some empirical data or anything, like I'll leave that up to the academics to really geek out and try to figure out if they haven't done so already, right? But I'm honestly not interested, right? My guess is that we need to have discussions of what is good or right to facilitate discourse with one another, to reflect on the decision making that we do. But what I'm realizing in myself, anyways, at least from the first person experience of living out my life, is trying to do what I should became a goal in itself, right? And in a way, it stopped me from being genuinely invested in what I was doing, right? Like it wasn't really coming from the heart. Like I was like I was doing it from, not from my own agency, but rather it was like compelled by some outside force that said that I should do it, right? Like I forget where I heard the quote, but I loved it, right? The quote was something like, stop shooting on yourself, right? And the idea was to stop imposing a bunch of you should do this on yourself, right? Like I should help others, or I should give more, or I should spend time with my family, right? The weight of these shoulds, right, is what I saw in my Villanova students, right? It's what I felt in myself. Um, and I know it weighs on the shoulders of a lot of friends and family members who all want to be better, right? They're constantly telling themselves, like, I should do this, I should do that, I should try to do this, or I should try to be better, right? And interestingly enough, I think it's that very thing that weight that should holds, um, that that is what's actually preventing them from the very thing that they're seeking to be. Which at the end of the day, I think for most people is just to genuinely love and care and be one with the community and to participate in making the world a better place or something along these lines, right? Like, I don't know if this will be encouraging, but I personally want all of you to know that you yourself are enough because you are already seeking to be better, right? And that, I wish that you don't let all these should have done this or should have done that strip you of your humanity, because that's what it kind of feels like, right? You're not perfect. None of us are. But I hope that in accepting who you are, you can strive for better without the burden of feeling like you're not enough. This sort of thought that what you are is different from what you should be. And because you're not what you should be, you're not enough, right? I can't speak for everyone else, but I personally feel this way. When I encounter a person, right, I want to love that person for who they are, not who they want to be, who they want to become, right? Like, that's the difference, right? There's who you are and there's who you think you should be. And there's something about, you know, being so focused on who you should be that we lose sight of what's in front of us. And in some ways, it's like you see past the person, you don't see the person that's in front of you. And unfortunately, if you are, placing all these shoulds on yourself, these requirements on yourself to be better, then I start losing sight of you. So the only way for me to see you as you really are is for you to be who you are. That's the good, the bad, the ugly. It's what I would hope that you would want from me. Because honestly, that's all I have to give. It's the good, the bad, the ugly. It's just who I am. So I'm not a good person. Not because I'm evil or malicious. I'm not a good person because I don't want the desire to be a good person to have any weight for me anymore. I really don't. It feels more like a burden. It feels disingenuous. It feels like a lie. I am what I am, nothing more, nothing less. If that's not enough for you, You can figure out why and live with it, but I personally hope that it's enough because who you are, as you are, it's enough for me.